Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to just wait for people to join and we will start at the top of the hour, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for people to join and we'll start on the hour, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our fourth session of Knowledge of Self in the Qur'an this Ramadan in the Cambridge Muslim College Ramadan Live program. This is our fourth session, fourth and final session, but it is also the khatam to the whole Ramadan Live program. I have the honor of closing out the month's programming, as this will be the last lecture for this year. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to be here with you throughout the month, and this is a really auspicious time as we come to the end of this month. And so to continue with this program, which has been, all of this program that we've been doing this month is possible because of the support from our donors. We are an independent institution and we're a registered charity. And so Cambridge Muslim College definitely relies on your generosity from our friends and patrons, not only from people in the UK, where Cambridge is located, but also across the whole world. So we ask you in these last few hours, days, inshallah, of Ramadan, that you become a regular donor or a one-off donor, any amount to support what the college is doing. You can also pay your zakat to support the students that will benefit them directly. So you can visit cambridgemuslimcollege.ac.uk/donate and donate today, inshallah. So over the past month in this series, we've been looking at knowledge of self in the Qur'an, and we looked at the distinction between the ruh and the nafs, and we discussed how most of our attention in this process of knowledge of self is on the nafs, and that it's this part that we can and we must change, develop, and purify. So in that process, we talked about the nafs al-amara bil-su, the soul that incites to evil, and the nafs al-lawama, the soul that reproaches itself. And these ones being the two main states of the self or the soul that we engage in within this process of knowing where our tendencies are and taking ourselves into account, doing this work of jihad an-nafs. And then last week, we looked at the centrality of the qalb, the heart, in the conception of self in the Qur'an, and the importance of actually locating our experience of self in the center of our being, in our chest, not just this abstract notion of the heart, but an actual physical location, and this dynamic within ourselves about uncovering what blocks us from being able to know Allah on a deeper level in this deeper state of witnessing, which is, as we've been talking about, the purpose of knowledge of self is to know Allah. And so in this process, essentially, we're focusing on the constriction, the forgetfulness, the blocking, or the disconnection of the nafs, this sense of ourselves as separate, to know more particularly about ourselves and what needs to be taken into account so that we can purify. So the more knowledge that we have of the particularities of ourself, then they can reveal the deeper parts of our soul, the ruh, which is pure and which is always connected to and in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what we're trying to do in this process is to know ourselves on a deeper level and bring our nafs in alignment with our ruh by essentially getting ourselves out of the way. And so this, spending this time of getting to know the particularities of our own nafs is in order to reveal the universality of our ruh. And so, as we talked about in the previous weeks, we need to look at ourselves, study ourselves, know what it is that we need to unblock and take ourselves into account, to be self-aware about these particularities, our imbalances, our inconsistencies. And the higher potential of our soul always still needs to be in the foreground. Meaning, we spend most of our time taking ourselves into account, looking at the nafs, but we have to understand and be connected to and have experiences of this higher potential in ourselves, and have that within our vision, within our grasp, in an experiential way, so that we are reconnecting with what we already have innate within us, the ruh. Because otherwise we can get completely deluded to our own individual experience and forget that what we're actually striving for is actually here in the moment with us at all times. And so we can transcend this delusion of our nafs at any moment by awakening the spiritual reality of the ruh and tapping into our soul's ability to perceive. We talked about the heart having this ability to perceive. And so the nafs, we talked about nafs al-lamara bil-su, nafs al-lawama, and then the nafs al-mutma'ina, which we'll talk about a bit more later in the session, the soul at rest or the soul in a state of tranquility, is not just a station that we hope to achieve in akhirah, which the Qur'an talks about, but something that we can cultivate, we move towards, and we can even get experiences of this soul at rest and have tastes of it, dhawq, tastes of it, in order to provide a window into our potential. And this window into our potential is something we have to stay connected to and be looking at the nature of our ruh as it is in submission to Allah, and connecting with this innate natural disposition of our soul, which is pure, the fitra of our ruh, fitra of our soul, even the nafs at its highest level, is to be pure. And so we can pay attention to Allah's creation and the signs in the natural world as a reflection of the fitra of the dunya, pointing to the fitra of our soul. And so, like I have said before in the past, we find our nature in nature. So in Surah Fusilat, Allah says, "We shall show them our signs upon the horizons and in themselves, until the truth becomes clear to them." So here, on the horizon, in the physical realm, right? So the world that we see outside of us, and in themselves, anfusihim, in themselves, referring to the inner world, the world of our inner experience. And so our human nature is, and we'll talk about how that means both in an abstract sense, the nature of our humanity, but also the physical manifestation of the human being, also being a reflection of the natural world and a reflection of the cosmos. So that we are, as human beings, are a microcosm of the macrocosm. What this means is that the same processes and laws and phenomena that exist in the physical reality or the physical realm are manifest signs of those patterns and processes that happen internally within our soul. And again, similarly in Surah Adhariyat, "And there are signs on the earth for those who are certain, and in your own selves will you not then see." So Allah is pointing to us to look to the dalil, the signs in the earth, to also reflect, to learn about and know ourselves. We not see the reality of our own nature. And so focusing on knowledge of other than Allah, the knowledge of the horizons and of ourselves, is an intermediate for knowledge of Allah. We can learn about ourselves by looking at the natural world, and we can learn about Allah by looking to His creation. So our being, even on a physiological level, is representative of the physical world. And our soul is an unseen reflection of those same realities within the inner world of our being. And so these are not merely metaphors, but actual spiritual laws that parallel the natural physical laws in this dunya. And so when we look at ourselves, we need to not make it such an abstraction. Remember, we talked about how we tend to think of ourselves just from the head up, and it's all based on thought and intellect and abstract notions of self. Whereas the physical, Allah is constantly pointing us to the physical for knowledge of Him, His knowledge of His world, and knowledge of ourselves. And so the nafs is integrated with the body, and the ruh is integrated in the body. And so this whole self, this whole system of ourself, is a complete microcosm living in harmony with nature and Allah. So both our human physical and spiritual dimensions correspond with the physical and spiritual nature of the universe. And similar to Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, the man that's we see on the advertisements for gyms often, but Leonardo da Vinci says that this is the human being as a reflection of the cosmos, so the microcosm of the macrocosm, and looking on a detailed level, even on down to the body itself. And so it's the reflection of the terrestrial and the celestial, right? So the beyond the universal laws and patterns and cycles are innately reflected internally. And so our spiritual nature is mixed up with our animal material nature. They're not separate, they're integral. And so some of our scholars in the past have linked even specific body parts to elements in nature. So for instance, the frame of the body being the earth, the bones, the mountains, even the marrow of the bones being minerals, the belly being the sea, the intestines as rivers, veins as streams, flesh as soil, hair as plants, and then even looking at the direction. So for our front being the east, our back being the west, our right being the south, left being north. These are things that we see constantly, even the breath. We talk about breathing being so fundamental, the wind, and then some scholars even talk about laughter being attributed to daylight, weeping to rain, the darkness of the night being grief and despair, sleep as death, and then looking at the seasons as well. So spring being childhood, summer being youth, autumn being middle age, winter being old age. And so these are, yes, they're poetic, abstract, sort of poetic metaphors, but they're much, much deeper than that, in the sense that we are made up of the same thing of the earth. And in order to have knowledge of self, we cannot completely understand ourselves without looking to the natural world, because what this does is it includes our sense of self in the whole, because we are a part, right? It's tawheed. When we try to understand ourselves in separation as this separate, independent phenomenon, we're always going to be looping in on ourselves, and we're going to not have the full picture, because we are part of Allah's creation, and the human being itself has this high station of being reflected. And so even when we look at the temperaments, the mizaj of the elements of fire, water, air, earth, these are things that are reflective of different potentialities of the human being. Somebody can have more fire, more water, more air, more earth. It's all in balance. And our goal is to bring these things into balance within ourselves, because we have all of it contained in ourselves. And in this physical integration of all of these physical and spiritual potentialities of Allah's creation, the physical reality, like all things in the physical, has an innate imperfection, basically due to the paradoxical nature of this realm where things are separate and where tawheed is hidden. And so humans are subject to that imperfection by nature of this physical form. But because we have this spiritual reality of our being, the ruh, we can transcend that and perfect ourselves due to this spiritual nature and our higher potential. And so this is where we must use reason and striving to purify and perfect, to attain this potential of Khalifatullah. And so when we look at this picture of knowledge of self, what Allah is pointing us to in these ayat in the Qur'an of looking to the signs on the horizon, looking to the signs in the earth, is that knowledge of the world, so studying the world, understanding the patterns, leads to knowledge of self, and knowledge of self leads to knowledge of God. And you could also say knowledge of self leads to knowledge of the world, right? Because it is a mirrored reflection, which then again leads to knowledge of Allah. Always coming back to the highest purpose of any pursuit of knowledge is to know Allah. And this is the entire purpose for our existence. So if we look at this idea of contemplating nature being a fundamental part of self-knowledge for the sake of knowing Allah. Ar-Raghib Isfahani says that the human soul combines the existence of the world, whoever knows the existence knows his soul. And so he's talking about this in relation to this ayat in Surah Ar-Rum, when Allah says, أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكُّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, do they not contemplate within themselves? And so Isfahani, commenting on this verse, says that if men had to reflect upon their souls, they would know the realities of the existence of creation, both transitory and permanent. So with this, we understand that with this knowledge of the soul, or the ruh, the larger fitrah of the larger reality of the fitrah of the human soul, we can have knowledge of the spiritual world and its permanence, right? Because the ruh is beyond the temporary manifestation of the nafs in the dunya. And with knowledge of the body, the physical manifestation of the soul in this dunya, then we can have knowledge of the physical world and its transience. So we're understanding that there's a permanent nature of the world and a transient nature of the world. The permanent being that which will last beyond this dunya time and this temporary physical manifestation of Allah's reality. And that within this temporary transience, there still exists a spiritual reality that is permanent. And thus the same with our own nature. So all of the work that we need to know about our particularities of our nafs is all temporary to this physical dimension, so that we can get to the permanence of the everlasting reality of our soul, the ruh. And so this idea that the human being is composed of earthly elements is something that comes up a lot, both in the works of scholars, but looking to the ayat of the Qur'an that are connecting with nature. So in Surah Al-Sajda, Allah says, who fashioned well everything he created and originated the creation of man from clay. And so this idea that Allah has combined within man these simple and complex elements to make this microcosm. And so the clay nature, this temporary physical manifestation of the world, we have within us the potential for the expression of both the negative qualities of what can be manifest in this world and the beautiful good qualities. And so sometimes the human being is as praiseworthy as an angel, and sometimes as blameworthy as an animal or a devil. And so we have this potentiality within us, and we have the part of ourself that we are striving to liberate, to purify. And so the soul that liberates itself from matter, from this material body of this transience, ascends to Allah and becomes a tranquil soul, nafs al-mutma'ina. So this is where in Surah Al-Fajr, Allah says, Ya nafs al-mutma'ina, O soul at rest, or O soul in tranquility. And then he says, return to your Lord, pleased and well-pleasing. And so this, in this ayah, it's mentioned in relation to Allah speaking about the Day of Judgment and the state of disbelieving souls in the Akhirah. And he talks about them being squeezed or in binding. And so in a state of constriction and strife, right? And we talked about this in other weeks, this covering or squeezing versus this revealing. And so he says, oh, nafs al-mutma'ina, the soul at rest, tranquil soul, return to your Lord, pleased and well-pleasing, to join my servants in paradise. So while this is the state of the believing soul who enters in paradise, and inshallah, this is what we strive for, this is what we want to be in a state on the Day of Judgment, the goal is for us to strive to be in that state before the Day of Judgment, and to strive for this tranquil soul, which is not in conflict or in turmoil with Allah's decree, right? It's something, it is in submission. It is in submission to its state as an abd, as a servant. And so this is how we work towards knowing our true nature of ourselves, and our nature of ourselves is as a servant. And so if we can know who we are in that sense that our ultimate reality is as a servant of Allah, then this is the end of all self-knowledge. And it is what frees us from the binding that Allah talks about in this separateness of the soul's life in dunya, where it is bound in its individual understanding of itself as separate, and not in this state of submission to its servanthood. And so ultimately what will reveal Allah to us, this knowledge of Allah, or at least our knowledge of what we can perceive of Allah and His total oneness, His tawheed over creation and over our existence, is this recognition. And so as long as we are stuck with our nafs and only deluded by our individual existence, then we cannot truly know Allah, because we're unable to see tawheed in its fullness. And so when we focus on knowledge of self, it's this paradoxical aspect where in order to transcend, we have to be fully present in the here and now. It's not disconnecting and disengaging from the manifestation of the nafs or the body, but it's actually by fully occupying ourselves in our transient temporal nature that will reveal the signs of our higher nature. And so we need to begin to understand ourself as our body, our jism, as the nafs, as the aql, as the qalb, and that this is all integral, this is all self, and that the ruh is the higher reality of our true self in its connection to this service to the one reality. And so as we reflect on all of these deep things that, you know, are beautiful signs and beautiful ayat in the Qur'an, and understanding them as always in practicality, I want to encourage us, myself and us, as we close these sessions and close the month of Ramadan, is that my sort of final practical assignment for you on the topic of today's session is to really intentionally go out and spend time in a natural setting. Whatever is the most sort of untouched natural landscape that you have access to, within reason, within your ability, anything that you can find, and reflect on the signs on the horizon. See the natural world as not just as a metaphor, but also as a mirror for your own nature. And especially reflecting on the changing of the seasons during this time. We're now just coming into a changing of the season. Just a few weeks ago was the start of spring in the northern hemisphere and the beginning of autumn in the southern hemisphere. And so this is a really important time. And, we're coming to the end of Ramadan. It's syncing with this new shift in reality of the world, but also you have to understand that this is fundamentally, you are connected to that same cycle, that same shift. And yes, we all have our own ups and downs and our own things that we're working on and working with and working through. We are all, by nature of being human, subject to the reality of the natural world and these universal cycles. And so we cannot become completely deluded and or preoccupied in our own self and our own nafs. We have to open our expansive understanding of self to the world around us. So watch how the natural world around you changes, even by noticing leaves changing or leaves sprouting or the weather starting to shift or feeling the breeze on your skin. This will awaken in you an attunement to these processes of nature. And what this will do, it will awaken your own inner nature. So it's not fully this intellectual process of knowledge of self, but actually exposing yourself to the elements can actually awaken the knowledge of yourself and awaken your perception to see yourself as an extension of this beautiful reality of existence, as this physical world and this being a mirror of the spiritual realm and your inner spiritual reality. And especially, we've been restricting food, so really using this time to pay attention to how your body responds to food, how it responds to weather, how it responds to environments, bringing your awareness of self out of just your thoughts and ideas and into your body on a physiological level is one of the most important things we can do to know ourselves and bring ourselves in alignment. We spoke last week about centering our self in the chest, in the heart. So now expand that to include locating yourself in the world and in the universe. So this still becomes the center of your universe is the heart. But as your awareness of inner reality in your chest, being aware of your integral nature. And so we want to be moving away from the notion of ourselves as separate and insular and seeing ourselves as part of Allah's creation. This is why it's so helpful to contemplate in nature and look at the wind blowing through the trees and there's something about even that movement of the tree and the wind that we sometimes forget to do on ourselves. And so, by mimicking even some of these things, we can bring ourselves back into a full knowledge of self. We are one body with the earth. And so using our faculties of perception to breathe it all in, awaken the intelligence in our body, stretch your body, use your muscles, awaken your perception in the body, awaken your fuller consciousness of self, not just your nafs, but your ruh that has consciousness beyond your own self-delusions and self-limitations. And the fact that you are connected directly to this spiritual reality and Allah is connecting you to your true identity as a servant. Alhamdulillah. So as we come to the end of Ramadan and we reflect on the blessings and opportunities that this month afforded us, we should, again, always reminding myself and us together, is that we should be readying ourselves for bringing those blessings into the months and days that follow. Not to leave all of this behind in this month until next Ramadan, but to actually bring it forward. So if you found moments of self-reflection in this month, you found time to ponder on the things that we've been discussing about knowledge of self in the Qur'an, I would just encourage you to make a commitment to yourself before the month passes, in these last days, to carry forward something new to take and implement in your normal mundane life. And maybe even trying not to think of it as going back to normal, but to carry the beautiful scent of this month into the days and months that follow. And now is really the time to put all this ibadah and reflection and contemplation to work. So in the world, the manifest world is where knowledge of self really can be found. So yes, as we've discussed today in the natural world, and also in the grind of the dunya, the work, even the strife, the difficulty, the injustice, maybe even the monotony or the relationship issues, whatever it is that is difficult about this seemingly mundane life, whether it's even resulting in depression, anxiety, all of it, it's all how we come face to face with ourselves, to know ourselves so that we can know Allah. So don't see it as anything else. There is no going back to regular life. This whole life is here for this purpose, for us to come to know ourselves so that we can know Allah. And so don't be deluded by the urgency of this dunya to make you distracted from all distracted from your ultimate purpose, which is being here to reveal Allah, to know Allah. And so use it, all of it, to advance this journey of self-knowledge. Study the world, study yourself, contemplate on all of it. Of course, we start intellectually, this of a contemplation, but then we move to a contemplation that's in the heart experience, so that we become human beings in our being, not just human doings. And as I've said before, we are trying to be with what is, whatever manifests, and be with Allah. In everything, everywhere, with everyone. It's all a mirror to reflect what is in you and reflect the truth of Allah's reality. So don't miss this opportunity, not just of this month, but of this life. Alhamdulillah, I thank you for all of your engagement throughout these sessions in this month. This concludes not only our series, we'll take questions as usual, so if you have questions, please. But this concludes not only our sessions, but also for the whole Ramadan live series for this month. And so as a reminder, all of the sessions throughout this whole month from all of the lectures will remain on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. You can catch up with them at a later date. They'll stay there, and you can come back and revisit them or catch up the ones that you missed. And we will put them all on a playlist on Understand the Qur'an, will be the title of the playlist. And please do, if you haven't already, subscribe to Cambridge Muslim College's YouTube channel so you can make sure that you don't miss out on any of these things. So, there's quite a lot of questions. Let's see. So can you recommend any book about self-development based on Quranic science? Many Muslims nowadays read so many self-development books written by non-Muslim writers. Yes. This is really important. And this is something that I think was starting to come to fruition. For a while, there hasn't been, but more and more people are putting out a lot of great books. One that recently came out by a friend and colleague of mine, Muhammad Faris, called Baraka Culture, or no, Baraka, I think it's Baraka Culture. It's a great book. It would be in this realm of self-development. and it's very practical. He breaks it down in ways, constantly bringing it back to the Qur'an and Hadith. So I highly recommend that. And there's others that are coming out. I'm actually working on a book myself. We'll be working on this, inshallah. What else? What advice would you give to someone who wants to convert to Islam, mashallah, who agrees with most beliefs in Islam, however, they struggle to believe in the afterlife despite staying in nature frequently? So, first of all, just in general, my advice to somebody who is wanting to convert to Islam, I myself am a convert to Islam, is that it doesn't have to be an intellectual struggle. It's important to make sure that somebody is connecting with their heart and recognizing that we can get caught up in what is religion and what people say and what is belief, but ultimately we should be asking at the end of the day, the bottom line is wanting to please Allah, wanting to know truth, wanting to be in surrender to the reality. So seeking truth. And so whether you get caught up in a belief in afterlife, it's about connecting to what feels natural about your instincts, about the reality of your spiritual being. And so when we connect with ourselves and our spiritual reality, we have an innate sense that points us to the everlasting reality of things, right? That things, we see things that pass, and then even if we have people that we know that have died or passed away, we have a sense that we still have a connection with that soul. Anybody who has this experience, most people I talk to, they can't explain it. They don't have words to describe it. They may not know what they believe, but they know what they feel. And we can feel and we can sense on a spiritual level the reality that this life isn't all that we see and that there is something beyond this physical dimension, but also beyond the finite from when we're born to when we die, that exists. And to be honest, even lately, people are focused a lot on justice because we're seeing so much injustice happening with what's going on in Gaza and this time of seeing genocide before our eyes and just the extreme injustice. But yet everybody, I've mentioned this before at the beginning, that everybody has an innate sense of justice. It's something that is within us. It's ingrained in our soul because Allah is Al-Adil. It's a quality, it's a name of Allah. So therefore, Allah has taught us all the names. We have a sense of justice. Every human being has a sense of justice. And yet, that wouldn't make sense. We wouldn't be able to understand justice if it weren't for akhirah, right? Because we see all kinds of injustices happening in this world, and we see people dying, doing injustice and getting away. It looks like they're getting away free. Because if it ends with death, there's people who have committed mass genocide and have died in their sleep peacefully. So therefore, there wouldn't be justice, and we wouldn't even have a sense of justice, because you can only fully understand justice if you understand akhirah. So this is something that I would say in reflecting on what you have innate in you and trying to uncover truth. This is what Islam is. This is what finding Islam is. It's really just about uncovering the reality of truth. So yes, so in terms of reading and this, this kind of building on somebody else's question, that seems like it's building on the idea of self-help books. I think, there's more and more people writing these type of things. This is a lot of the work that I do, is trying to disseminate and put the words of the scholars and the understanding of the Qur'an in a language that is familiar to us as contemporary individuals. Oftentimes, like Al-Ghazali is an ocean of knowledge. There's so much practical knowledge within even just the Ihya Ulumuddin, which it was just a huge volume of work. But I find that a lot of people even go and read the Ihya Ulumuddin, or they read an English translation of it, and they still have a hard time understanding it in terms of what does that mean for today. And so we shouldn't expect that we're going to be able to read things written in the 9th, 10th, 12th century and understand it as is in our contemporary understanding of even the self and even what our notion of self-help is. And so we do, as an ummah and collectively, we need to begin to translate these vast bodies of knowledge and the first principles that don't change from the Qur'an and what we're learning, what we've been studying in this session of knowledge of self in the Qur'an, but we have to understand it from how we understand the self now. And this is really important. This is the work that I'm really focused on. I'm in the process of writing a book to this nature. And inshallah, with your dua, I'll have the life to continue doing it, and make dua that we have more people blessed with the facility and the capacity to be able to do this work, because we need so much of it in this time. So inshallah, we will move in this direction. So this is going to be it for today. I just want to say, on behalf of our staff and particularly all of our live lecturers, we'd like to thank you for joining us over this last month. If you enjoyed these sessions, please consider supporting Cambridge Muslim College. You can help us continue our vital work through regular giving or one-off donations, whatever the amount. You can pay your zakat to benefit students in need. And you can do all that by visiting cambridgemuslimcollege.ac.uk/donate. And we ask that you consider giving generously, especially in these last remaining blessed nights of Ramadan. Donations are crucial in supporting the work that we do, but also equally important, we ask that you keep us in your du'as, the du'as for the college, and we ask you and we make du'a for everybody that has supported the college. May Allah bless each one of us in these final moments of Ramadan. May we reap the benefits of the sweetness of this month, and may we increase our knowledge of self so that we can increase our knowledge of Allah, and may we carry this knowledge and may it continue to awaken within our hearts the deep knowledge of what Allah has put in within us, the secret within our hearts. May we carry this forward each and every day of the year to come until next Ramadan. May we be much better and higher station from this, and may the world be in a better place. Ya Allah, we ask you to be with the people suffering in Palestine, in Gaza, and in Sudan, and the people of the Uyghur people, and the people of the Congo. We ask you to ease their hardship, Ya Allah. We ask you to, with all of the dua of all of the Muslimun in the world throughout this time of Ramadan, may this be a blessing and an ease for all the people in suffering. May all of the people who are perpetrating the injustices and the oppression be made to cease and desist, and may there be a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Ya Allah, we ask you to for this time to be a blessing, and for there to be openings, and for there to be healings for the world. Ya Allah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين آمين آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.